Hello, everyone. This is Nicholas Palmer from Group IB. We're just going to give everyone a couple of more minutes to join here today. I'm actually just waiting for my colleague and Head of Threat Intelligence, Dmitry Volkov, to come. So we'll give everyone just a couple minutes, and then we'll get started here. So just bear with us. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Nicholas Palmer, and I represent Group IB as the Head of International Key Accounts. And I'm here today with my colleague and co-founder of Group IB, Dmitry Volkov.
Hello, gentlemen.
And ladies, I'm sure, on the line. So we're very excited to present this webinar to you today. Dmitry and his team have done a lot of very hard work investigating the Lazarus group and their activities, very complex malicious infrastructure, and today we're excited to walk through a little bit of our report that we've called Lazarus Arisen, the architecture, tools, and attributions behind the Lazarus group. So in today's webinar, I'll walk through a little bit about the Group IB research into the Lazarus group and some of the high-level information before Dmitry, whose team actually led the analysis, will go through the analysis of the tools and multiple layer of infrastructure used for the Lazarus group. We'll also be covering the key findings from the report, as well as some of the logic that we used during the attribution process. Just for some housekeeping items, the report is publicly available on Group IB's website, including the IOCs as well. And this report is a way of giving back to the security community. Obviously, this wouldn't be possible without some of the early release from the Polish researchers right after the incident. So feel free to share this report as TLP Green with your trusted sources. And of course, if there's any questions as we go through, we'll try to work them into the presentation if we can, and if we can't, then we'll answer them at the end of today's webinar. So first and foremost, I think we all know for everyone on the line, but if we don't, let's go through it a little bit more. On February 3rd of 2007, the Polish researchers of Bad Cyber actually posted information about a series of attacks aimed at Polish financial institutions. Within the article, and of course they published the technical indicators within their report, which was very helpful for a lot of security researchers to do more analysis on what had actually happened. In the article, they actually stated that it was by far the most serious information security incident that they had seen in Poland, and they claimed that over 20 commercial banks had been the victims of this particular type of attack. So again, just very important that information was shared by these researchers, so the rest of the security community could do additional research into these events. So again, I think for most of the people on the line, a lot of initial links to Lazarus were pointed shortly thereafter. I think most of you have read BAE Systems' report, which focuses primarily on malware analysis and some connections to Russian code protectors like Enigma Protector. And they were one of the first groups to post about the links to Lazarus. Of course, in the report, they definitely stated that there was additional evidence required to fully piece together all the evidence in this attack. And we definitely saw further information about these groups masquerading as Russian hackers. And this is very interesting to us, not only because Group IB's target market is financial institutions, and this attack related directly to them, but of course some of the initial kind of traits that we found within analysis and from the security community were that there was masquerading as Russian hackers. So we saw in the BAE Systems report that we showed you on the previous slide that Russian Enigma was used, the code protector. There was also strings of Russian language in the command lines of the client traffic forwarder, one of the pieces of malware within the toolkit of Lazarus. Of course, this information is not correct. We've seen that in many reports, and our Russian-speaking analysts see that these command lines are not written in any type of understandable or proper use of the Russian language. Another sign of masquerading as Russian-speaking hackers was the use of the exploits from Flash and Silverlight, taken directly from Neutrino and Angler, both Russian-speaking cybercriminal developed exploit kits. So those were some of the initial pieces of evidence of masquerading as Russian hackers, and of course this piqued Dmitry and his team's interests. So what was the motivation? And I think there was a lot of good reports, especially the report that Kaspersky Labs did in regards to the initial tools that were used to identify some of the motivations, and their analysis of the SWIFT tool, and our analysis confirms that as well, is that they had a good tool designed to monitor SWIFT transactions and to do reconnaissance against who senders are, who receivers are, what accounts are being transferred to and from, and who the statement numbers are. So there was 3 different toolkits to monitor and do reconnaissance against different SWIFT transactions. So good report by Kaspersky first and foremost. So let's move outside some of the other publicly known information and different reports that were available, and let's look at some of the key findings from Group IB's report. So definitely unique tools and infrastructure was some of the key findings from Group IB's report. Dmitry and his team did a lot of work to analyze the complete infrastructure of Lazarus Group, all the way to the 3rd level of infrastructure. The group used encrypted SSL channels to communicate between each layer of the malicious infrastructure, and of course they used Soft Ether, a legitimate VPN client, to achieve anonymity. And it was interesting, of course, to note that there was no 0 days employed. The group really used flexible approach to avoid detection by endpoint security. Here you see on your screen the different sets of tools that they used, the SWIFT toolbox that was mentioned in the Kaspersky Labs report, and this is one of the additional toolkits that we identified that we haven't seen in any other publicly available security reports, this BackendListener, which establishes connection with servers and with server RAT installed on it. And it gets commands directly from the threat actor, and Dimitri will touch on this in more technical detail later on in today's webinar. So obviously, you know, from the title of today's webinar, and in addition to the unique tools and infrastructure, the links to North Korea that we found were particularly interesting. So after Dimitri and his team's investigation into the infrastructure of Lazarus, Group IB actually identified 2 North Korean IP addresses at the final layer of CNC infrastructure. Dimitri is going to touch on this in much more detail later on, because I'm sure that's why you all joined today, is to get more insights from Dimitri and why we attributed this group to North Korea. And the second is that we corroborated this evidence with previous investigations from law enforcement in South Korea, and they confirmed the evidence that we found as well. So before we get into Dimitri's analysis, let's just kind of have a review of what the infection process is. A lot of this was covered in other reports, and then we'll touch on some of the more unique key findings from Group IB. So as most of you know on the line today, the first step in the infection process was to find systems of interest, and the group basically infected customers using a watering hole technique. And as we all know, they infected a number of different web portals, from the Polish Financial Authority, from the National Banking and Security Commissions of Mexico, and a couple of other resources as well. And they exploited known vulnerabilities in JBoss and LifeRay to create these separate watering holes. As we mentioned on previous slides, they compiled an exploit for Silverlight, which was previously used in Angler and Rig exploit kits. We saw the Flash exploits from Neutrino were also included in this process. Lazarus didn't love everyone. This was certainly true from the whitelist of subnets that they had. In total, there was 255 subnets that the Lazarus group was interested in. 19 different banks from Poland, you can see on the screen here, 15 from the US, 9 from Mexico, a number of other Latin American financials of interest, as well as some from the UK. So this slide here just shows in a little bit more detail. You can see I'm not a graphical artist specialist by any means, but this is kind of a graphical representation of exactly what had happened. So the visitor visited the specific watering hole site, and if they came from the whitelisted IPs that the Lazarus group was interested in, they were actually redirected to the exploit server. From there, the exploit server installed the exploits on the victim's machine and a reconnaissance module as well. So the reconnaissance module would then collect different information about that system and send it back to the exploit server. And if the system was of interest, they'd send additional commands to execute their dropper, loader, and ultimate payload. And again, you can see the different exploits that are publicly known and, of course, available in our report as well. So the infection process, the reconnaissance phase, learning more about the system. So once executive exploits was complete, the recon phase, which was a backdoor installed on the targeted machine, was installed. Persistence was maintained by adding the recon into the auto start process, and then data was collected about the system of interest and sent back to the CNC. You can see all the different commands here that were collected about the particular system of interest, collecting the host name, different IP configurations, pinging Google to see if the system had access to the internet. And if the system wasn't of interest, the recon module actually executed kill command and removed itself from the system. Now, if it was of interest, the recon module actually downloaded the dropper and installed client RAT. Group IB analysts actually investigated this and identified that there was 2 separate versions of the dropper. And Dimitri will touch base on that in a little bit more detail. The loader was simply used to decrypt and run the client RAT payload, and after which they had full access to the systems of interest within the infected network. You can see all the different commands that client rat had, from removing itself from the system, deleting certain selected files, or uploading files to the CNC server. So from there, additionally, client traffic forwarder had a number of different commands. Essentially, this piece of malicious software acted as a proxy within the infected network to receive commands from one infected system and send it to another of interest. And you can see, again, some of the commands listed here. So now what I'd like to do is actually hand it over to Dimitri, because we're going to go into some more detail about the analysis of Lazarus's infrastructure.
Hello again. I hope you can hear me well. So this is a scheme that describes actually our key findings: the network infrastructure that consists of 3 layers of different servers, and all these layers are connected using SSL tunnels with each other. So on the left-hand side, you can see attacked organization, and all this reconnaissance model, client rat, and client traffic forwarder, we need to communicate with C2 server. And using this, to do this, we're using SSL channel with layer number 1. So we were looking for an active service with layer 1, active layer 1 service to analyze it. Later I will describe how we did it. But on the layer 1, we found only 2 malicious programs related to Lazarus, of course. It was server rat, it was general rat, and server traffic forwarder that was actually responsible for to accept traffic from infected hosts on the left-hand side, and then it forwarded it to next layer. And what was interesting, on layer 2 we found the same set of tools, the same server rat, the same traffic forwarder. The only difference between layer 1 and layer 2, but server traffic forwarder accept traffic on port 443 and send it on the next layer on port 8080, that was related to layer 3 server. And again, on layer 3 we found the same server rat, slightly modified version, but it all was the same. And of course, the most interesting thing, BackendListener, that we never seen before. We never seen it in other reports. So that's why we started to analyze it, and it was a really complicated task. And analyzing, we found that it was designed to accept connections from administration tool, to accept commands from administration tool, to transfer these commands via this transparent SSL channel directly to infected hosts, and of course accepts information from infected hosts and send it back to threat actors. What is important, on every layer, layer 1, layer 2, and of course on layer 3, there was additional port opened. It was a port 3365, and it was also important finding, and I'll explain a little bit later why. So how we started our analysis. 4 days later, after the first news about compromisation of Polish banks, some technical researchers published a long list of indicators related to Polish incidents. And you can see here the list of IP addresses that were supposed to be C2 servers or related to any malicious program that we found during incident response, just 4 days later after the first news. And I marked with a red line several IP addresses, actually 5 of them, that were really interesting for us. What was really interesting and why we paid attention directly to them. Using our service, actually a passive SSL service, we found that some of them, some of these IP addresses had the same SSL certificates, and these SSL certificates had very strange common field. So this is the IP addresses from previous slide, and as you can see here, there is a common field that always, in all these cases, had very strange template. It has third-level domain name / email address, and after that email address. And of course, these malicious or suspicious, SSL certificates were always hosted on several IP addresses. Like here, you can see the first IP address from our list. The next 2 IP addresses also were listed together, and the most popular SSL certificate that was valid since April of 2006 was also active, and it was and 2 IP addresses from initial list were listed here. So we make the conclusion that it's potentially possible to write some sort of signature to detect this unknown, or I would say suspicious common field to track other hosts. After that, we found that all these infected IP addresses that were related to these suspicious SSL certificates were actually belonged to legitimate servers. It was Windows machines, and all these servers were in different countries. So we were looking for active machines that were active, running port 443, and together with these malicious SSL certificates. We contacted server owners, explain them what we need, and some of them provide us ability to make a computer forensic research. So during our computer forensic, we found on several servers that this SSL certificates was binned into the port 443 that is related to a service, malicious service, related to malicious program server traffic forwarder that accepts connections on port 443 and send it on next layers. As you can see, this is an example of how we should threat actors launched this program. We launched the name of executable file, specified first port. This is the port that should be listened by this malicious program to accept connections, the IP address of next layer, and the port of the next layer. So, analyzing this malicious program, we understood what were the next layers, so layer number 2. What we found that the layer number 2 was also the compromised servers. Usually, we see that in all incident response, threat actors use brute force technique to get access to these compromised servers on Windows machines. And on the next layer, we also found another malicious program that we called server-RAT, the same that we found on the first layer. And in both cases, previous program, server traffic forwarder, was launched by another program. So it was a child process of server-RAT. And this server-RAT was listening to port 3365. It was also interesting for us. That's why we scanned all network, not all internet, for this specific port, and found more than 3 million IP addresses. That was a really long list, but we also had a list of servers with malicious or suspicious SSL certificates. We matched these two lists and found that there are similar hosts that were running at the same time, and we started to analyze how this port 3365, responds to some of our requests on active infected hosts. And we found that on very simple requests, response with encrypted traffic, but the response was always response from infected hosts was always really similar. It was about 12 bytes that actually indicate some of mistake. Because of encryption or traffic encryption, we were not able to analyze what was the real error code, but anyway, it was 12 bytes, and that's why we scanned all these 3 million IP addresses, trying to send them requests, analyzing responses, and found 74 IPs that were related to this server-RAT. So that's how we found all IP addresses that were running with server-RAT. And of course, some of them were running together with server traffic forwarder. On some of them, we also found I would say, suspicious activity. On some of them, there was a legitimate VPN agent, soft-eater VPN agent, that is a publicly available tool developed by a Japanese university. And it was also one of the indicators that potentially, if you see the host with port 3365 with running suspicious SSL certificate that also in the past had this legitimate VPN agent, and also one of the confirmation that this was used by Lazarus cybercriminals. Later, on layer 3, we found BackendListener, and this was a very unique program. And why it was so important for us? Because this program accepts traffic on port 8080 from layer 2, and when this program also was listening for port 1990, but it was suspicious because we didn't see a lot of traffic on this specific port. We wrote our own emulator to analyze how this program works, and we spent really a lot of time analyzing and debugging with BackendListener, and found that this program is able to detect if you are really administrator and using original administration tool, or you just connect to port 1990 trying to probe if it's open or not, or trying to fuzzing this specific algorithm. So it uses several techniques. One of them is accept traffic. It checks the message. It checks if it's encrypted properly, and analyzing different packets, packet length, and response on every packet with specified by algorithm responses. If it confirms that it was a real administrator who should connect with BackendListener, when it accepts successfully all further connections and transfer commands from administration to the next layers, and of course to infected machines. And analyzing this network activity, we found that not only 4 IP addresses were active on this port. 2 of them were related to North Korean IP subnet, and 2 of them were servers in Japan and China, and both of them were also running this legitimate soft ether VPN agent at the time. So we believe that sometimes operators from Lazarus group using this soft ether VPN agent to hide themselves and, of course, be anonymous in the internet. And why we were sure that it was also made by the Lazarus group from the same subnet, because we also found in public resources materials from previous investigations held by South Korean authorities. It also mentioned that attacks were originated from the subnet from the same subnet that we found in 2017. So,
so you can tell that a lot of work went into this. I think Dmitry often understates the efforts of his team, and when he laughs to say that a lot of work went into some of the activities that they did, I know how hard the team worked. So thank you, Dmitry, for walking us through your logic and all of the technical details in your analysis. So we'd like to pause there, and I know there's a lot of people very interested to learn more about our analysis. So we'd like to take some questions from the group, and we actually have Dmitry here, and as well some of his team as well. So if you have specific questions, we'll take them now.
Okay. Well, as you can see, there is no questions. One of the main goals of our research was not to analyze malicious programs on network infrastructure, of course, or in corporate networks. After Polish incident, we started to get a lot of requests about indicators, new actual indicators, because after Polish incidents, everyone started to put on public everything that we know, but all these indicators were related mainly to incidents in Polish banks. But what about banks in other countries? So that's why we started to analyze network infrastructure to be able to find a new way, more effective way to track Lazarus activity in the internet, because the technique that we used with watering hole doesn't allow quickly understand where a C2 servers, because it's always hard to get new samples, analyze them, and extract C2 servers. And sometimes it's not always possible. So with our new approach, when analyzing this network infrastructure, you can track them, I would say, on a daily basis. It's pretty easy task. And if you don't mind, I can show you one of the new examples.
This one from dark matter?
Yeah. So is
on this?
No. So this is an example of one of the SSL certificate that was mentioned in our report. So you can see it is pretty old one, so it was active since April of last year. And we found these SSL certificates on 13 hosts. Give me a second, please. So the first host we found was related to November of last year, and just one day before, yesterday, May 31, we found new host that is active, is running, and it's running and it hosts the same suspicious SSL certificate. So that's why we can track every new host scanning the internet on daily basis. And tracking new SSL certificates, we're able to track new malicious hosts. And this is a good feed of IRCs, network IRCs, that could be used by everyone, because we see that sometimes antivirus solutions don't solve the problem and don't detect Lazarus toolkit as they should detect.
I think there's a question from Allison. So Allison, we're not oh, there we go. We see your question. Just give us 1 second. So the question for the audience, just so everyone is aware, is did we perform forensics analysis on the compromised servers?
Yes, exactly. This is how we found the server route and server traffic forwarder on compromised servers on layer 1, layer 2, and of course on layer 3.
So we were just asked to repeat the question. So the question was, did we do forensics analysis on the compromised servers? And Dimitri's response was yes, of course, and that is how we identified server RAT and traffic forwarder on the infected server. So yes, we performed computer forensics on that. So I think we have another question, so we'll just wait there. Okay, sweet, thanks. Thanks for the question, Allison, I appreciate it. And just so for everyone on the line that is interested, the previous IOCs that Dimitri showed and just how we're constantly monitoring for different infected hosts on the internet, if you're interested to understand how to get those, we do populate that information within our Group IB intelligence portal. So if you would like to get more information about how to get that, you can certainly contact us via our website here and contact information. So we'll continue to stay online for a little bit just in case there's additional questions. We'd be really happy to hear them, and yeah, so we'll wait here for you. So there was just a question about if the recording is going to be made available. So we did record the webinar, and we can certainly send it out to whoever is interested. Just send us a quick email if you'd like to receive a copy of the recorded webinar, and we'll send it out to you. Yeah, Oscar. So we recorded the webinar, and we'll send it out to you. Just send me a quick email. You can email us here, info@groupib, or you can email me here directly, and I'll send you a copy of it. I put my email in the chat box at the bottom. All right, well, we'd just like to thank everyone again for joining today's webinar. Again, if you're interested to get Group IB's report, you can download it from our website. If you'd like a copy of the webinar, you can email me directly here in the chat box. So thank you, everyone. We'll stay on the line here for a couple more minutes just in case there's anyone shy to ask questions. But otherwise, thank you very much, and have a nice morning / evening, depending on where you are in the world.
Yes, and if you have private questions, please feel free to contact us.